The untold story of escapes at Rikers Island. The impossible break. The night was silent until a guard's radio suddenly exploded with panic. Code red. Inmate on the run. A prisoner, against all odds, had just slipped through Rikers Island's towering fences. Alarms blared, floodlights cut across the yard, and helicopters roared overhead. Guards scrambled in every direction, dogs barking furiously. For the first time in years, someone had made it past the concrete, the razor wire, and the lock gates. But here's the twist. This wasn't the first time. Rikers Island has a long history of desperate men trying the unthinkable. Some vanished into the night. Most were dragged back, broken, bloody, and humiliated. So, how did this escape even happen? And what secrets about Rikers Island security does this reveal? Chapter 1. The Fortress Nobody Leaves. Rikers Island is often called a prison city, surrounded by water, with high fences, barbed wire, and guard towers watching every corner. It was built to make escape feel impossible. Prisoners used to joke, the only way off this island is in a body bag. But behind the jokes was a burning truth. Men inside were always searching for a way out. Some studied guard patterns. Others bribed staff. And a few risked everything, hoping the East River currents would carry them to freedom. At first, the attempts were almost laughable. Inmates hiding in laundry carts. Prisoners slipping under food trucks. Most were caught within minutes. But each attempt taught the next escapee something new. And then came the first real plan, the East River gamble. One prisoner believed he found a weakness, water. If he could get past the fences, the river was his only way to freedom. Late one night, he made his move. He scaled a fence, cutting his hands to ribbons on the razor wire. But he didn't stop. He sprinted across the yard, ignored the warning shouts, and dove straight into the dark, freezing East River. Guards scrambled to the shoreline, flashlights scanning the waves. Minutes felt like hours. For a moment, it seemed like he was gone forever. Some inmates watching from the windows cheered, thinking he had made it. But then the extreme moment hit. The tide turned, dragging him backward. His screams carried over the water as he fought to swim. Searchlights caught him flailing, his body weak from the current. By dawn, he was back in custody, half drowned, coughing up salt water, and barely alive. Yet, his attempt proved something shocking. Escaping Rikers wasn't impossible, just nearly impossible. And that revelation lit a fire for the next desperate men to try. The hidden passage. After the failed swim across the East River, Rikers guards doubled security. More patrols, more lights, more dogs. Every inmate was reminded that escape meant certain punishment. But still, whispers spread in the cell blocks. If one man could almost make it, maybe someone else could finish the job. This time, the escape idea came from deep inside the prison itself. Workers on cleaning duty had noticed old maintenance tunnels beneath some of the buildings. Cracked walls, rusted pipes, forgotten spaces that guards rarely checked. A small group of inmates began to explore these passages during their shifts. They memorized turns, marked spots with tiny scratches, and even found where the tunnels connected to an outer fence line. It was slow, patient work, weeks of planning. At first, guards thought nothing of it. The men were model prisoners. They showed up for duty, did their jobs, and caused no trouble. On the surface, everything was calm. But behind the walls, an extreme plan was unfolding. One night, using stolen tools hidden in mop buckets, the inmates forced open a maintenance hatch. Heart pounding, they slipped into the tunnels, crawling through darkness with nothing but scraps of cloth tied around their hands for silence. Hours passed. The tunnel led them closer and closer to the edge of the prison grounds. The sound of the East River waves could be heard faintly above them. Then came the moment that turned the whole prison upside down. The final wall cracked. A hole opened just big enough for one man to squeeze through. The first prisoner slid out, his feet touching free soil for the first time in years. And that's when a guard's flashlight cut through the night. The alarm blared. Another escape attempt had begun, and this one was dangerously close to success. The tunnel breakout. The moment the alarm sounded, chaos erupted. Sirens screamed, Red lights flashed across the yard, and correctional officers stormed toward the outer fence. The first inmate, already halfway out of the hole, panicked. He tried to sprint into the darkness, but his foot snagged on loose wire. He stumbled, buying guards precious seconds. The others, still inside the tunnel, froze in terror. Should they keep going or crawl back before it was too late? For a brief moment, it was strangely quiet, just the sound of the river splashing against the rocks. The inmates whispered fiercely, arguing in the dark. Some wanted to keep pushing forward. Others begged to turn back. That hesitation cost them everything. Floodlights slammed on, flooding the ground in blinding white. Guards shouted orders, rifles raised. The first man bolted toward the riverbank, his body a dark blur against the lights. He dove headfirst into brush, hoping to vanish into the night. But then came the extreme event. Dogs were unleashed. Their barks tore through the air as they raced after him. Within seconds, the man's screams replaced his footsteps. The dogs dragged him down hard, guards piling on top. He fought, but it was useless. Blood, dirt, and chaos everywhere. Inside the tunnel, the other inmates could only watch as their chance at freedom collapsed in front of them. The hatch was yanked open, flashlights blinding their eyes, and one by one they were pulled out, beaten down, and cuffed. The tunnel was sealed, the hole patched, and once again Rikers Island reminded everyone. It wasn't going to let anyone leave so easily, but the story didn't end there. The failed tunnel escape inspired another kind of plan, one far bolder and much more dangerous. The sky attempt. The tunnel fiasco had left the prison on edge. Guards were stricter. Cells were searched daily, and even whispers of escape could land a man in solitary. But in a place like Rikers, desperation never dies. This time, the idea didn't come from underground. It came from above. In the early 1980s, one inmate realized that while the fences and waters were locked tight, the skies over Rikers were open. He began to study the movement of prison transport vans and the flight paths of helicopters flying into nearby LaGuardia Airport. The plan sounded insane, but it was real. A helicopter hijacked on the outside would swoop in and pluck him straight out of the exercise yard. At first, it seemed impossible. How could anyone pull that off without being noticed? But with the right people on the outside, money in the right hands, and timing on his side, the impossible started to look possible. Weeks passed in silence. The prison settled into routine. For most inmates, life was back to boredom. But then came the extreme moment. A helicopter actually appeared, hovering dangerously close to the prison walls. Its blades thundered over the yard, drowning out the shouts of the guards. Prisoners ran to windows, some cheering, others stunned into silence. Guards scrambled, pointing weapons skyward. For a few heart-pounding seconds, it looked like one of the most daring prison breaks in New York history was about to unfold. But what happened next would shock everyone, and prove just how far inmates were willing to go to escape Rikers Island. The helicopter chaos. The helicopter's roar shook the yard. Its blades whipped the air so violently that dust and debris swirled everywhere. Guards shouted for backup, their radios crackling with panic. Unauthorized aircraft over Rikers. Lock it down now. Inside the cell blocks, inmates pressed their faces to bars, watching in disbelief. Some were screaming with excitement, chanting the name of the prisoner who was supposed to make the jump. Others banged on the walls, urging him to run. The target inmate, heart pounding, sprinted into the yard. For a split second, he saw freedom just above him. The rope ladder dangled from the helicopter door, swaying dangerously in the wind. He leapt, grabbing hold with shredded hands, clinging to the rope like his life depended on it. And then, pure chaos. Guards opened fire, not with bullets, but with tear gas canisters. The air filled with choking smoke. The helicopter bucked under the pressure, the pilot fighting to keep it steady. The ladder swung violently. The inmate dangled in midair, coughing, unable to climb higher. Then came the extreme event. The ladder snapped loose. He fell hard into the yard, crashing onto the concrete. Guards swarmed him instantly, wrestling him down as the helicopter peeled away, vanishing into the night sky before it could be caught. For the prison, it was proof that even the skies weren't safe. For the inmates, it was proof that the hunger for freedom would never die. But if helicopters and tunnels could fail, what came next would be even stranger. A plan so bold, it didn't involve running, swimming, or flying, only walking right through the gates. The disguise escape. After the chaos of the helicopter fiasco, Rikers locked down harder than ever. More guards, more cameras, more searches. It felt like escape was truly impossible. But then came a plan that was so simple, it seemed almost laughable. Disguise. One inmate noticed that contractors, nurses, and food delivery workers came in and out of Rikers every day. They didn't face the same body searches, and their uniforms looked almost identical. What if, instead of breaking out, someone could just walk out? The idea spread quietly. Inmates began studying the workers who came in, how they dressed, how they carried themselves, even how they talked to the guards. With bits of stolen clothing, smuggled hats, and fake badges scratched out of cardboard, the plan slowly came together. One afternoon, an inmate made his move, dressed in a stolen maintenance uniform. He joined a group of actual workers leaving through the gates. His head was down, clipboard in hand, and for a terrifying moment, it looked like nobody noticed. He was steps away from freedom. But then an extreme twist. A guard, suspicious of his silence, called out, "Hey, you, what's your name?" The inmate froze. His mind raced, but no answer came. The clipboard shook in his hand. The guards closed in. Within seconds, he was tackled to the ground, dragged back into the prison as the real workers looked on in shock. The disguise plan had failed, but it sparked something new inside Rikers. If men could almost walk out through the gates, what if someone could get out through the walls themselves? And that's when the digging began. The digging escape. By now, Rikers was buzzing with stories of failure. Swimming across the East River, crawling through tunnels, even dangling from a helicopter. But inside the cells, some prisoners refused to give up. Their new plan was old-fashioned. Dig. Armed with nothing more than sharpened spoons, bits of metal hidden from the kitchens, and sheer determination, a small crew began working at night. Every evening after head count, when the blocks went quiet, they would chip at the concrete walls and floors, hiding the noise under the cover of banging pipes and flushing toilets. At first, it seemed like nothing, just tiny cracks, a handful of dust scraped away. But night after night, the hole grew bigger. They stuffed rags in the cracks during the day, painted over with stolen chalk, dust to blend in with the walls. Weeks passed, then months. The prisoners rotated shifts, digging inch by inch, their hands blistered, their knuckles bloody. Slowly, the outline of a crawl space took shape. If they could break through, it would lead straight to a service corridor, just a few yards from the outside. It almost worked. One night, the last section of concrete finally gave way. A rush of air blew through the opening, and for the first time, they could smell freedom. Excitement surged through the group as they prepared to crawl through. But then, the extreme moment hit. During a surprise night inspection, a guard noticed loose dust on the floor. His flashlight beam caught the faint outline of the hole. Within seconds, the cell block erupted. Guards stormed in with batons and shields, dragging men from their cells as the unfinished tunnel was exposed to everyone. The diggers were thrown into solitary, their dreams shattered just inches away from success. And yet, the legend of their efforts spread like wildfire. If men could almost claw their way out of Rikers with just spoons, what would the next desperate escapee dare to try? The Riot escape. By now, Rikers had become a pressure cooker. Failed escapes, brutal punishments, and overcrowded blocks created an atmosphere ready to explode. All it needed was a spark. That spark came during a sweltering summer afternoon. Food rations had been late, tempers were high, and when one inmate shoved a guard during chow time, the cafeteria erupted. Tables flipped, fists flew, trays shattered on the floor. The riot spread like wildfire. Cell doors rattled with the pounding of fists. Inmates screamed for freedom, for justice, for release. Smoke filled the air as fires were set, alarms blared, and the guards scrambled to regain control. Amid the madness, a small group saw their chance. While guards were distracted, they rushed toward a side exit near the kitchen loading docks. The door, normally locked, had been left ajar in the chaos. With nothing but desperation on their side, they pushed through, spilling out into the yard. For a few precious seconds, they were outside the cell blocks, the island's open air filling their lungs. The East River gleamed in the distance, freedom almost within reach. But then, the extreme moment hit. Floodlights snapped on. Dozens of guards in riot gear surged forward, shields up, batons swinging. The escapees ran, but they were met with a wall of force. Dogs lunged, sirens wailed in confusion. Every man was dragged back, battered and bloodied. The riot was crushed, the prison restored to its cold order. But the attempt left a message echoing through every cell. Escape was never just about freedom. It was about survival. And soon, the most infamous escape attempt in Rikers history would prove just how far men were willing to go. The infamous break. Among all the failed plans, swims, tunnels, disguises, even helicopters, one attempt has gone down in Rikers Island history as the boldest of them all. It began in the early 1990s with an inmate named Sidney Snell, name changed for privacy. He wasn't the biggest or the toughest, but he was clever. He studied guard routines for months, memorizing every detail. Which officer dozed off during night shifts, which doors clicked but didn't fully latch, and which cameras had blind spots. His plan was simple in theory but terrifying in execution. He would break through the main fence, swim the East River, and vanish into New York City. On the night of his attempt, the air was heavy and the sky was dark. Using wire cutters smuggled in through an unknown source, Sidney made his move. He cut through the fence with trembling hands, each snap of metal echoing like thunder in his ears. Somehow, he wasn't spotted. Somehow, no guard turned. When the last wire gave way, he sprinted across the yard, dove into the freezing black water, and started swimming for his life. Minutes felt like hours. The East River's current was strong, pulling him under again and again. His lungs burned, his arms felt like lead, but he kept pushing. Behind him, the alarms blared. Guards shouted. Searchlights cut across the water, and a helicopter circled overhead. For a shocking moment, it seemed like he might actually make it. He reached a floating log near the shoreline, clung to it, and tried to drag himself onto land. But then came the extreme twist. Police were already waiting on the other side, exhausted and shivering. Sidney collapsed into their arms, his dream of freedom drowned out by the sound of handcuffs snapping shut. The escape attempt made headlines, shaking the prison system to its core. If one man could almost swim his way out of Rikers, who else might try next? And that question would lead even more desperate, more dangerous escape plans in the years to come. The Copycats. Sidney Snell's near success sent shockwaves through Rikers Island. Prisoners whispered about in the yards, replaying every detail. If he could cut through fences and nearly swim to freedom, maybe the next man could finish what he started. It wasn't long before the Copycats came. Some tried the same method, hiding stolen tools, watching the guards, waiting for a dark night. They believed they could do what Sidney couldn't. Beat the river and slip into New York. One group even trained in secret. During showers, they practiced holding their breath underwater. In the yard, they jogged in circles, pretending it was just exercise. But really they were building the stamina for one desperate swim. But every attempt ended the same way. One man leapt into the water only to be dragged back by the current, screaming for help. Another was spotted by a guard tower before he even reached the fence. The river was merciless. The alarms were merciless. And Rikers itself was merciless. And then came the extreme moment, an escape attempt that ended in tragedy. Late one night, 2 inmates slipped out and dove into the East River together. They swam hard, side by side, toward the lights of Queens. But the current was stronger than their bodies. Guards and towers watched helplessly as one man went under and never resurfaced. By morning, divers pulled his lifeless body from the river. The other inmate was hauled out alive, coughing and sobbing. His dream of freedom turned into horror. The death silenced the prison. For weeks, no one spoke of escape. The East River had claimed one of their own. But deep inside, the hunger never left. Because in Rikers Island, where hope is scarce, the dream of escape is sometimes the only thing that keeps men alive. The inside job, By now, most inmates knew the truth. Breaking out of Rikers alone was nearly impossible. The walls were too high, the fences too sharp, and the East River too deadly. But some prisoners realized there was another way, one that didn't involve digging, swimming, or disguises. It involved the very people guarding them. Over the years, stories began to surface about guards willing to bend the rules for the right price. A carton of cigarettes could buy extra food. A stack of bills could smuggle in a phone. And for enough money, a key, a gate left unlocked, or even a blind eye turned at the right moment. In one case, an inmate built a quiet friendship with a rookie officer. He promised her money, safety, even a new life if she helped him escape. At first, she laughed it off. But weeks turned into months, and her loyalty began to bend. She slipped him information about patrol schedules, about weak spots in the system. The plan was bold. On a transfer day, she would forget to lock the van doors. The inmate would slip out while the vehicle idled near the bridge connecting Rikers to Queens. Freedom was just one step away. For days leading up to it, he could barely sleep. His heart raced at the thought of open streets, of running through New York as a free man again. But then came the extreme moment, the betrayal. The officer who had promised him everything reported the plan to her superiors the night before. When the van pulled up the bridge, it wasn't Freedom waiting. It was a swarm of armed guards. The inmate was dragged out before he even tried to run, humiliated and broken. The officer was quietly transferred, her role kept out of the papers. But inside Rikers, everyone knew even an inside job wasn't safe. And yet, that didn't stop others from trying. Because the dream of escape was stronger than fear, stronger than failure, and stronger than betrayal. The great cover-up. Not every escape attempt at Rikers made the headlines. Some were hidden. Some were erased before the public ever learned what happened. Why? Because Rikers Island had a reputation to protect. The city wanted people to believe it was escape-proof, an island fortress where no one could ever get out. But the truth was different. In the early 2000s, a small group of inmates nearly pulled off a coordinated breakout. They had stolen uniforms, forged passes, and even timed the change of shifts perfectly. For a terrifying hour, it looked like the plan would succeed. Two men actually reached the outer gates, blending in with staff as they walked calmly toward the exit. Guards waved them through without a second glance. They were just feet from stepping onto the bridge to Queens. But then the extreme twist. A senior officer returning from break recognized one of the workers. His face was too familiar, his posture too stiff. In seconds, the alarm was sounded. Guards swarmed the gate, tackling the men to the ground just as their boots touched the bridge. It was one of the closest calls in Rikers history. And yet, the public never heard about it. Official reports listed it as a security breach, never calling it what it really was, a near escape. Families of guards were told everything was under control. Newspapers never ran the story. It vanished, covered up to protect the prison's image. But inside Rikers, inmates spread the story like wildfire. They told and retold it in whispers, each time adding fuel to the fire. If they almost made it, maybe I can too. And that dangerous hope would spark the next wave of escape attempts. Each bolder, each riskier than the last. The forgotten escapee. Most attempts at Rikers ended the same way. Alarms, dogs, guards, and handcuffs. But every so often, one man slipped through the cracks. This was one of those times. In the late 1980s, an inmate, whose name the prison tried to bury, managed to disappear completely. He wasn't caught at the fence. He wasn't dragged out of the water. He simply vanished. For days, guards scrambled in panic. Head counts came up short. Cell doors were checked again and again. But the man was gone, and nobody could figure out how. Rumors spread fast. Some said he had bribed a guard to walk him right through the front gate. Others swore he had hidden inside a supply truck that left the island that morning. A few even whispered that he had slipped into the tunnels and swum out at dawn, escaping before anyone noticed. Whatever the truth was, one fact shook Rikers to its core. For 3 long days, the man was free. He roamed New York City, blending into the crowd, tasting freedom that most inmates only dreamed of. But freedom didn't last. The extreme twist came when he was spotted by pure chance. An officer recognized him wandering near a bus stop in Queens. Within minutes, the street filled with police cars. He ran, darting into alleyways, but there was nowhere left to hide. Dragged back in chains, his brief taste of freedom was over. The prison moved quickly to bury the story, downplaying the escape in official reports. But inside Rikers, the legend lived on. For years afterward, inmates would whisper his story. He did it. He made it out, even if only for a few days. And that legend gave birth to the next wave of desperate plans. Because if one man could truly walk free from Rikers, maybe, just maybe, the next one could too. The modern era escapes. By the 2000s, Rikers Island had transformed. More cameras lined halls. Electronic locks replaced old keys, and motion sensors covered areas once left unguarded. On paper, the prison was tighter than ever. But desperation doesn't care about technology. Men still dreamed of escape, and some were bold enough to try. One infamous case involved an inmate who exploited one of Rikers' weakest points: transport vans. These vans carried prisoners to court hearings and medical visits, leaving the island for the first time since the inmates had been locked inside. To those chained in the back, the moment the van crossed the bridge felt like the closest thing to freedom. In 2010, one prisoner made his move, using a smuggled piece of metal. He picked the lock on his shackles during the ride. While the guards up front chatted, unaware, he pried open the back latch of the van door. Traffic slowed on the bridge. The moment was there. He leapt. For a few seconds, it worked. He hit the pavement hard, rolled into the median, and scrambled his feet, running toward the city skyline. Cars screeched. Drivers shouted. Chaos erupted on the highway. But then, the extreme moment crushed the attempt. The guard spotted him in the rearview mirror. Radios screamed with alerts. Within minutes, police swarmed the bridge. Pinned against the barrier, nowhere left to run, the inmate was slammed to the ground and dragged back into custody. The escape attempt shut down traffic for hours, making the evening news. Reporters framed it as a daring stunt. But inside Rikers, prisoners saw something else. Proof that no matter how secure the island became, there would always be cracks to exploit. And in the modern era, with drones flying overhead and cell phones sneaking inside, new escape dreams began to take shape. Dreams even more dangerous than before. The drone era. By the mid-2010s, Rikers Island faced a new kind of threat. One no guard tower or fence had been built to stop. Drones. At first, drones were just a nuisance, buzzing over the yards and dropping small packages, cigarettes, phones, even drugs. But soon, prisoners began to dream bigger. If a drone could carry contraband, could it also deliver escape tools? In 2017, officers caught inmates plotting to use drones to smuggle in wire cutters, hacksaw blades, and even fake IDs. The plan was bold. Cut through the fencing, disguise themselves, and slip away during yard time. The drones would supply everything they needed without ever risking a human accomplice. One night, a drone actually appeared, its lights blinking faintly in the distance. It hovered just above the yard, lowering a package attached by string. Inmates reached up eagerly, pulling the parcel down with shaking hands. Inside were tools, real tools, that could change everything. But then, the extreme moment shattered the plan. Guards, already tipped off, stormed the yard with sirens blaring. They tore the package away before anyone could use it, cuffing the men on the spot. The drone zipped off into the night, disappearing before it could be traced. It was the first time Rikers officially admitted drones were being used in escape attempts. The prison scrambled to install anti-drone technology, including jammers and warning systems. But the damage was done. The idea had already taken root. If men once tried swimming rivers and crawling through tunnels, the new generation dreamed of technology breaking them free. And the question haunted every guard on Rikers Island. If drones could deliver tools from the sky, how long until they delivered freedom itself? The most recent attempts. When the COVID-19 pandemic swept through New York, Rikers Island was hit hard. Staff shortages, sick officers, and chaos inside the blocks created the weakest security the prison had seen in decades. For inmates, it felt like the perfect storm. Guards were stretched thin, patrols were sloppy, and medical transfers happened almost daily. If there was ever a moment to escape, this was it. In 2020, several inmates tried to take advantage. Some faked medical symptoms, hoping to be rushed off the island in ambulances where security was lighter. Others tried to blend into the chaos of emergency hospital runs, thinking they could slip away in the confusion. One man even staged a desperate plan during quarantine lockdowns. He disguised himself in stolen PPE gear, mask, gloves, hospital gown, and tried to walk out with a group of nurses. For a terrifying moment, it looked like he might succeed. But then the extreme moment came. A veteran guard, suspicious of his height and nervous body language, stopped him at the gate. A quick ID check revealed the truth, and the would-be escapee was slammed against the wall before he could take a single step off the island. Even in the middle of the pandemic, when the world outside was in chaos, Rikers Island proved it could still hold its prisoners in place. Yet these attempts showed something powerful. No matter the decade, no matter the technology, no matter how impossible it seems, men inside Rikers have never stopped trying to escape. The psychology of escape. Why do men keep trying to escape Rikers Island? Even when the odds are stacked against them. Even when failure almost always means punishment, injury, or death. The answer lies deep inside the prison walls. For many inmates, Rikers isn't just a jail, it's a nightmare. Overcrowded cells, violence, endless waiting for trials that drag on for years. Days blur into weeks, weeks into months. Time feels frozen. Escape, no matter how impossible, becomes a kind of hope, a dream to cling to, a story to tell yourself in the dark when the walls feel like they're closing in. Some see it as survival, others see it as defiance, and for a few, it's the only way to keep their minds from breaking. Psychologists who studied escape attempt at Rikers say it's not always about reaching freedom. Sometimes it's about control. For men who've lost everything, their rights, their privacy, their futures, the act of trying, of fighting back, is its own form of victory. But still, that dream is dangerous. Because at Rikers Island, hope can kill. And that leads us to one of the darkest truths about these escape attempts. For some, the line between escape and self-destruction is thin. The darkest attempts. Not every escape attempt at Rikers ended with handcuffs and punishment. Some ended in tragedy. For men who had nothing left to lose, the escape itself became a gamble with death. One inmate hurled himself from a second-story window, crashing onto the concrete below in a desperate attempt to scale the outer wall. His legs shattered on impact. He never walked again. Another tried to hide beneath a garbage truck, clutching to the undercarriage as it rolled toward the gates. He was crushed before he even made it off the island. And the river, always a river, claimed more lives than anyone could count. Some drowned silently in the current, their bodies pulled from the East River days later. For them, the dream of freedom ended in icy water, swallowed whole by the prison's natural moat. These tragedies reminded everyone of one grim fact. At Rikers Island, the price of hope was often blood, the island that never lets go. For over 90 years, Rikers Island has stood as New York's most infamous prison, a place of violence, despair, and endless attempts at escape. From tunnels and disguises to helicopters and drones, from riots to inside jobs, men have risked everything to break free. Some nearly made it, a few even touched freedom, but none escaped for long. Because Rikers isn't just a prison, it's a fortress, surrounded not only by walls and wire, but by the weight of history itself. Every failed escape, every drowned swimmer, every desperate leap has only added to his legend. The legend of an island that refuses to let anyone go. And yet, the story is never over. Even now, as Rikers faces closure and the city plans new jails to replace it, one question remains. As long as there are walls, as long as there are cages, as long as there are men dreaming of freedom, will there ever be a prison that can truly hold back the will to escape